Hey everybody, welcome back to another gameplay of some sort here. I'm going to play Hindenburg's Hour for a couple of turns. This is actually a very good game. It's by the same company that did Keto Butai, so this is by, I never get the name quite right, Conflict Simulationen. I'm not good at German, so forgive me. I always know I get that wrong. But this is by Dr. Richter Games here. There's their address down there for me. So Benjamin Richter put this out. So this is the same team, like I said, did Keto Butai. And I'd say one reason I like this one, it feels like I have a little bit more choices. With Keto Butai, you're managing your aircraft and your carriers for the Japanese fleet, but it seems to be a lot more random in what happens. Here, there's still quite a bit of randomness that will decide how things go, but it does feel like you get a few more choices, such as your map here. We have two starting areas. So the idea of the game is in 1914, make sure we got August of 1914. Basically, this is what I got off a wiki article, so we'll see if I got this right. The Russian armies were invading on the East Front during World War I. So you had the Second Russian Army, First Russian Army, and the commander at the time of the German 8th Army wanted to pull back, consolidate, but high command didn't want to lose that much in the way of territory. So they sent Hindenburg to be in charge of the 8th Army, and Hindenburg pretty much said, we'll go ahead and fight. And as history kind of showed us, the German army thoroughly did a very good job of defending and repelling the Russian invaders, and they held off until reinforcements arrived, and it was a German victory. And so this was like a very, very big victory for the German army, which really led to kind of the sense of superiority. And then as the war went on, they finally kind of got ground down a little bit. So this is an interesting game in that the few times I've played, I get mixed results. The idea of the game, if you look, I know I said it's a let's play, and I'm talking, but if you go and look at, there's victory conditions scoring. Oh, I thought I had a little chart, but essentially you're trying to keep the Russians away from Königsberg, which is up here, this pink area, or you're also trying to keep the two armies, because see, the Second Army marches north, the First Army marches west, and they meet up generally somewhere in here, and if they touch, you lose. So the victory check, it says the core, subtract the German. I guess you're looking for, okay. So the best way is just right here. Essentially, you want to destroy 4 Russian corps to win, and that's after you subtract German losses. So for example, if I killed 4 Russian corps and suffered 1 German corps loss, then you win. But I'm telling you, it's a little more difficult to do. Killing a corps is pretty hard. So a lot of times when I play, I'm just happy if I can get to the end of the turn tracker and I've kept the units, the two armies, from meeting or reaching the Königsberg area. So the game starts on August 17th, and you're going to play until you hit the 31st. And we have a very simple sequence of play. Now the map is pretty small, so just moving the camera around, might be a little disorientating at times, but I just have to move it to small sections of the map to see the action. So we'll go ahead with the sequence of play. I got a little dice cup here. Now the sequence of play is we're going to check for movement, and if the army marches, we have this little chart here. You roll for the army. On a 1 or 2, it stays put. 4, 5, or 6, it moves 1 hex, and a 6, it'll move 2. And so every turn that it comes to one of the Russian armies, you have to see if it's going to move. Alrighty, so we'll roll here. So 5. So they're going to move 1. Now the rules say, in the book it's got an illustration that this army here is pretty much going to hug the top part of the map. So they are going to move 1. After movement, we check for combat. Now we have come in contact here, and the way combat works, it's you roll a die 6. On a 1, 2, or 3, it's going to be a German victory. If it's a 4, 5, or 6, it's a Russian victory. So the way that you count bonus is you compare how many units are fighting, and then the Russians get a bonus for each unit above and beyond. So for example here, this unit and this unit would kind of cancel each other out in terms of bonuses. Then there's an additional 3 Russians, and that's how it works here with the Russians. Because the idea is they work as a unified group, they provide a bonus to no matter who is fighting here. So even though they're not adjacent to the enemy target, the idea is they could be skirmishers, they could be applying pressure on the flanks. So it's kind of like a unseen actions. So this would add 3 to my dice roll. So essentially what's going to happen is this German unit is going to lose regardless of what we roll. But see, the step losses aren't really like physical losses. So if there's a chance even if he gets reduced and you don't really get reduced again, you just kind of fall back. So let's see what happens here. Because I know that the German army is going to lose, I'm not going to roll for the victory conditions. I'm just going to roll to see if they get reduced. And I know they're going to retreat because they lost. Now, the way you see if there's a reduction in force is, again, you just roll a die 6. And on a 1, 2, or 3, you get reduced by 1. And if you roll a 4, 5, or 6, then you stay fine. So now this part we check for everybody who's adjacent in combat. Okay, so let's roll for the German unit first. Alright, they did not get disrupted. They're fine. Well, let me make sure. So 1, 2, or 3, they're disrupted. Let me double check real quick. And that's on page 4. Yeah, the result of 1 through 3, it is disrupted. Okay, so you want to roll high for that. So it is disrupted. Then we check for the cav here, the Russian cav. Okay, they didn't get disrupted. And then the 20th Corps, they got disrupted. Now, because the Russian lost, or I mean the German unit lost, they're going to fall back. Now, I kind of get to decide. The AI, they pretty much follow a pattern for how they move forward and fall back, but I'm in charge of the Germans, so I'm just going to say you're going to go back here. They go back 1 because they lost the overall combat. Nice. Now, the Russians only advance on the move, so because they won combat, even though they won combat, they're not going to move forward. If they lost combat, they wouldn't move back. So that takes care of all of them. Then we're going to check for the Russian Second Army. But here's an important part about the Russian Second Army. They are not active in the game until August 19th. So this first 2 turns, they don't participate. So even though they're down here, technically this means they're not on the map, so I can't interact with them at all. So they're just going to sit there. They don't even do combat. So Second Army would just kind of skip. Then it goes to the 8th Army. Now with the 8th Army, you do have 1 loose cannon in your 1st Corps. So this gentleman's name is Hermann von Francois. So we're going to roll. On a roll of 6, he's going to move randomly, regardless of disruption or whatever is wrong with him. But anything else that I get to control him like I would any other corps. Now the other thing too, for movement, the Germans can either move 1, they can do a forced march, or take the rail. Now the rail lines are these gray lines. And if you move by rail, you can move an unlimited amount of spaces unless you go adjacent to an enemy unit zone of control. Plus, there's limits about moving past the blue lines because that's kind of like deployment areas. It's owned by the Russians. So I can only take rail up so far. One of the strategies with the game is, because the Second Army doesn't come in for a while, is to take this 20th Corps and move it up north with everybody else. And I'm gonna leave it. Well, no, we can move it. Thing is, you just gotta try and trace a path with the rail. Even though it's unlimited movement, you just gotta, what I do is I just kind of trace a path, and if it ends up in a hex that I'm happy with, it's gonna end in this town up here. So I'm gonna move him up. The only reason why we're doing this is because now I'll have 4 units up here, and then what I can do is try to move some units south so we can try to flank, because destroying cores, like I said, is tough. Basically what you gotta do is surround them, cut off their supply zone, like their supply phase, and if they go 2 turns out of supply, then that's one way to eliminate a core. You can also eliminate a core by setting up combat situations in which they can't retreat if they lose on my attack. With the Germans, after I move, then we would look to see who's adjacent for combat. No combat there for the Germans. And then we would check supply, because that would be the next phase item here. We check supply. Then we check for rally, which is the next thing. Now the way I do rally is we'll look to see who's wounded. I don't think it matters in what order you do it. Now the Germans recover on a 3, 4, 5, or 6. They have a very good chance of recovering. Oh, good. So he rolled a 3. And that's because they're on home turf, right? So they can get supplied a lot easier. And initially, the Russians supply or undisrupt on a 5 or 6, and he rolled a 6. Okay, well, there you go. Now, the reason why this is important is it affects several aspects of the game. It affects combat, and it affects the march order. That would be the end of the turn after you check for victory. Well, we just started, so there's no victory condition. Then I advance the turn marker, and you start over. Since there's no disrupted units, they rallied, they're going to just make their standard die 6 roll to see if they march. They roll a 5. So they're going to move 1 more. And again, the book has a little diagram that says, a little chart like how they move. So we're going to move up here. Same thing. It's going to be 4 units attacking 4 core, attacking this core. Now another thing too of interest is, even though we have a reserve unit down here, this says reserve, and we have a cav unit here, that has no effect on the game. Also, terrain has no effect on the game. All you have to keep track of is the fact that, you know, it's a hex. If it has this deep blue, the Masurian Lakes, you cannot enter or cross. If you just need to use rail, and then this border here, like deployment zone border. I mean, that's pretty much all you got to check. It doesn't matter if you have woods, mountains, things like that. So it has no bearing on combat. Plus, there's no stats on these units, because again, it's just a die 6 roll to see the combat results. So once again, they have an excess of 3, so that'd be a 3 bonus on the die roll. There's no way he can win the fight. So what we'll do is check for disruption. So the German unit, now it's quite, your units will go from disrupted status to not disrupted quite frequently. Now we'll check for this cav, because he was adjacent. Alright, so he's going to disrupt. Now this will be good, because if I can get them disrupted, and 1, 2, or 3, he's disrupted. What that does is it actually subtracts from their die roll to see if they do the forced march. Now, because the German unit here lost the combat, we're going to fall back. And now they've got a nice line of troops. Second Russian army is out of the game. 8th, we're going to check to see if that Francois guy activates on a roll of 6. Nope, he's good. So I'm going to... Now you can force march your German troops, and they can move 2 hexes. And the only downside is that you cannot force march 2 turns in a row. So I could actually force march here, because the idea is I'm trying to eventually set up a flank. And the AI for the Soviets, or the Russians, they don't deviate from this path. So they're just going to follow along here. So they're not going to like move troops down here to fight. They just pretty much like a steamroller, just kind of go forward. So I'm going to put on them a forced march marker to remind me that they cannot march again. Then we do rally. Since there's no German units to rally, I'm going to check for this first Russian, and they rally. Bummer. And they rally on a 5 or 6. Probably can't see the die roll, and he fails. Good. That's useful. That will help in combat and for the force march. Rally's done. No victories to really have to worry about. Now there are some rules that talk about like how far forward you can move and do different things into once you start hitting this area back here with these blue lines. And I don't go into depth when I play, only because there's just always little things that I forget, little rules about movement and where you can go. So I'm just kind of moving in I just play it for what makes sense for me. So if you're reading along in your rule book and you go, hey, you weren't supposed to move past a certain point, yeah, technically you're right. But this is for my enjoyment. So I'm going to move these guys when I can. Now that's it for the turn. There's no victory condition points or anything like that. So I've got guys that are being forced marched, so we're good. I'm going to advance the turn marker to the 19th of August. That means the Russian Second Army is now in play. So a sequence of play goes back to the First Army. I'm going to roll to see if they activate. But remember, I subtract 1 from the die roll. So if I roll a 3, 2, or 1, they aren't going to move. So they rolled a 1. They're not advancing. Great. And there's nothing adjacent, so there's no combat. Now, for the Russian Second Army, I do the same thing, except there's no dice modifiers because they haven't suffered any losses or casualties. And they rolled a 2. So remember, just here's the chart, a 1 or 2, they move 0 hexes. So the Russian First and Second Army aren't moving on this particular turn. That's fine by me. Now I cannot force march again. Oh wait, it's the German, so first I gotta roll, and if I get a 6, Francois activates. Oh great, Francois. Now what Francois does is you roll another dice 6, now it tells you which hex direction he moves, if able. 3. I believe 3. It should be 1 is north, 2, 3. So he's gonna advance there. Oh, that just works out perfect on the map, doesn't it? Yeah, so 3 is southeast. Great, so here we go. This guy Francois says, charge, all by himself. Now, when the Germans attack, they just attack who they're adjacent to, and the defenders don't get bonuses for having all these units adjacent to each other, like one big group. That group bonus only comes when the Russians attack. So since the German's attacking, he's just going to worry about who he's adjacent to. Now as far as the bonus goes, there's no bonus here. Even though he's touching 2 Russian corps, this one's disrupted, so it doesn't add a bonus to the die roll for victory. So it's just a straight up 1, 2, or 3 German victory, or 4, 5, 6 Russian victory. So let's roll and let's see what happens. A 3. So this is a German victory. Only on a German attack do these units get pushed backwards. So normally Russian units don't advance. They just kind of stay put. But when the Germans win a combat, they actually get to push back. So first of all, let's check for. I guess I can move them back. Now remember, we're just kind of following this path here. Now they can't disrupt more than this. And I don't move forward if we win. Yeah, because that's Francois. Yeah. I'm just checking here. Yeah, see, I can't activate Francois again, which is kind of a pain. But if we win the combat's voluntary. Must retreat. Yep, victorious Germans may not advance. If they were the losers, then they retreat. So essentially, I can push Russians back, but I can't advance forward for victory. All right, so let's check for disruption. So even though he won, what that means is he doesn't have to retreat. If he lost, he'd retreat, but is he disrupted? So 1, 2, or 3, he is disrupted. Then we'll check for this cav because it was involved. He's disrupted. Now, later on, there are possibilities that if you fail your disruption check, you rotate the counter so that the next time you do a rally attempt, you get a bonus on your rally roll. But if you suffer combat before you get to make that rally roll and you fail your disruption, then it kind of resets you back to the more difficult chance to rally. So right now, these two units, like, I don't have to roll disruption for him because he can't be more disrupted than that right now. So there we go. We did Francois. Now the rest of the Germans can now do their movement. Did I already do one movement point with them? I forget. So we'll do our one movement. 1, 2. And I'm going to take their forced marches off. That means they're eligible next turn. And they are not adjacent to anybody. And I'm going to see if I move here. No, we're going to wait. Okay, there you go. 8th Army's done. Now we check for rally. And remember, they rally on a 3, 4, 5, or 6. I rolled a 6, so he is rallied. And then Russians rally on a 5 or 6. They don't. And they rally 5 or 6. They don't. That's great, because that's going to give us a bonus on our marching die roll, plus it will give us bonuses for combat later. So actually, that's really, really good. Okay, I'm advancing the turn marker. See, I'm on turn 20 and I haven't killed anything. It's just all about positioning. In fact, part of it, because you can't move into these deployment areas for the Russians, it's almost like you want them to advance so that you can get up and flank. So it's kind of a tough spot sometimes, but we're going to have to move the Germans up here so we can start putting pressure. Okay, so Russian First Army, they rolled a natural 2, so they're not advancing anyway, but because they had 2 disrupted, I would subtract from that roll. So the more disrupted they are, the less likely they are to move forward. So they're not going to move, and they're not adjacent to anybody, so no combat. Russian Second Army, on a 1 or 2, they don't move. Russian Army rolls a 6, Russian Second Army. So according to our chart, they're going to move 2, and they pretty much move straight north, and there's no units down here to oppose them yet. So them getting a 2 really sucks, because 1, 2, yeah, it's bad. The only good thing about this is I just wish these hexes were a little bit bigger. I get to put a Russian Second Army forced march counter on the turn track. So what that means is they forced marched. So on this next turn, if I rolled a 6 again, they couldn't force march a second time because they have to wait a whole turn. I guess I could put it here as a reminder. Since when the turn advances, that means they've already done a forced march, so they can't force march again. Just a little visual aid reminder. Then we check for supply. I don't have units up here that are blocking or preventing any units from resupplying. So we check for rally. And again, now, well, let's see what happens here. I know one of these I failed the rally roll, didn't I? What I should have done was, you know what, I just explained that. I correct myself. I think one of these guys failed. And so what you do is you rotate it to remind you that they actually have an easier chance of rallying. Which means when I did combat earlier, I should have checked to see if he was disrupted. Because I can go from a bonus on your disruption to back to being fully disrupted. Yeah, I probably messed that part up just because I was playing and trying to explain things and not paying attention to my own things I told you to do. So let's roll for here. On a 5 or 6, they're fine. Okay, so they're still disrupted. So I would rotate them. I gotta do that now before I forget again. Now, because they turned once, they now rally on a 3, 4, 5, or 6. Now, if I had failed again, I would have rotated it one more time, and then that would become an automatic rally the next time through. But they rallied this time, so we're going to be okay. Now, what's nice is the Germans, if they fail a rally, they rotate once, and then they auto-rally the next time. And the rules explain because they're on their home ground, it's easier for them to get food and supplies because it's at home. They got the rail network that they're taking advantage of. A little bit tougher for the Russians. So hopefully I remember that to check my disruption status is better going forward. That's the rally. We're going to check for victory conditions. Nothing's dead. All right, so turn advances to the 21st. And we're going to check to see if Russian First Army moves. They subtract 1 from the roll. A 3. 3 is still an advance of 1. Now, even if they have a disrupted unit, the disrupted unit still moves forward. The Russians always move forward. The other rule about the Russian movement is they can't create gaps. So like this unit here, well, let me see. They're going to move here. This one moves here. Now, technically, this one could move up. I know the hexes are a little too small for me. And this guy can move up because there's no gap in the line. No gap in the Russian line. Now we have combat. I have 2 German units adjacent to all 4. So this one, these two kind of cancel each other out. This one doesn't count either because he's disrupted. This guy over here, he's not adjacent to anybody, but he gets to add his strength. So the Russians get basically a +1 bonus to their attack roll. So remember, on a roll of 1, 2, or 3 is a German victory. So if the Germans roll a 1 or a 2, they still win the fight. And they lose. But now we check for disruption. So because these 2 units are adjacent to the enemy, I'm going to check for them. All right, he's not disrupted because on a 1, 2, or 3 they're disrupted. He is disrupted. Okay. Now remember, I get to check to see if he goes back to a fully disrupted state. So on a 1, 2, or 3, he loses his bonus to rally. I rolled a 4, so he's fine. And then this one we'll see if he's disrupted. He's disrupted. Okay, First Army is done. Russian Second Army goes. They advance 1 hex this time, which they had to anyway because they already had a forced march marker on them. So I'm just going to move them up by 1. Now I got to be careful how I set the camera so I don't put it on top of these markers and mess them all up. Okay. Now, at this point, I might want to start thinking about moving one of my Russian armies or German armies back, because the idea is I don't want them to move forward. I want them to be stalled and pushed back, because if they keep coming up, then these 2 armies will meet at some point, or pretty much they're being unopposed to Königsberg. So what I got to do now is look at my rail and see about maybe moving a unit back, because I just was very poor at moving stuff up. They're not forced march, so maybe what I'll do is try to move something up here and cut off supply. So we're going to move like 2. We're going to force march them. So we're going to go 1, 1, 2. Now, nothing there yet, but if I go 1, 2, and put a forced march, put a forced march. So I'm taking advantage of the mobility I've given the German units over here That way, if there's a retreat, it's going to be very tough for them to retreat if we win some battles here. So I might be able to, you know, cause some problems. And also this might give me a good disruption in supply. But now I do have combat because I didn't pull these units out. And I just moved these up. So what we'll do here is, now you don't have to fight. That's the thing. As the Germans, you don't have to fight. But I think I want to. Like this unit here can attack here. So they'll attack. So we roll on a 1, 2, or 3. Now there's no bonuses. It's just a straight 1, 2, or 3 German victory. It's always the risk. Because see, now they have to retreat. So he's going to fall back 1. And I'm going to keep his forced march. Because I think I just put those on this turn, right? So they won't come off. This is fighting now. And we're going to check up here. See, now this unit is going to fight here, but no bonuses because that's disrupted. You know, they're adjacent, but he doesn't get to add because he's disrupted. And disrupted. Oh, you know what? I forgot to see if Francois. No, I already did. That's how he got here. Oh, Francois. So this guy will attack here. Good. So he wins. That means this guy has to retreat. Now that's good because when we check for supply, I've got Germans here cutting off his supply because I'm owning this zone of control, this hex here. Did I roll to see if he was disrupted? I think I flipped him. Yeah, he's disrupted anyway. So they lost the fight, he's disrupted. He won the fight, but he can't advance. Now, they weren't adjacent. Okay, they're good. And they're only adjacent now because he lost, so it doesn't initiate a new combat. So trying to explain the game while I play, I think I'm making a little error here and there. So if you catch things, please share it out because I'm prone to do that. Okay, so the combat for the German army is over. We're going to check for supply. So let's do that real quick. The only thing that's, again, really tough with the game is in order to, you know, put a unit kind of out of supply, it says you have to completely surround it. The German units, they own like a zone of control 1 hex out. And it says if there's like an adjacent unit here, the presence of an enemy unit negates a zone of control. So I'm thinking that because I've got, well, since I have a unit here, technically I don't own this zone of control. So this unit here is not completely surrounded. If for some reason that unit wasn't here, then I could say he's surrounded because there's a friendly Russian there. So like I said, that's why it's really, really hard to kill stuff, because getting units out of supply is really, really hard. That's why it's kind of like you almost want them to advance a little bit so you can start trying to force gaps or make it so that when they retreat, it's difficult to retreat because you have people flanking. So that's why when I play, I'm just happy if I keep them from reaching the Königsberg area, because killing cores is really, really tough. So supply, I don't think I've stopped anything from being out of supply. So we're going to check to see now if you rally. So Germans, they rally on a 3, 4, 5, or 6. So he's rallied. This Cav, because he's been rotated once, he rallies on a 3, 4, 5, or 6. Now he rolled a 2. So I'm going to rotate him one more time. I'm just going to put him so he's upside down. That means he auto rallies next time, unless he fails in combat and then fails the disruption check. Then he gets flipped all the way back to fully disrupted and has to start the process over. So right now, on the next turn, if nothing changes, he will auto rally. This one here, first disruption level, so it's a 5 or a 6. Okay, so he failed, so he gets rotated one time. Whoops. First time fail. Oh, and he does rally. He rallied on a 6. I have a feeling, like I said, trying to explain and track, I think I got everything. I think I made checks. Alright, we'll say I did. Victory, I didn't make victory condition. So a new turn, I advanced my turn marker. Plus, I'm going to get rid of the forced march marker for the second army because they've now gone one full turn without a forced march. So they're good to go. And the second army, then first army, they subtract 2 from the roll to see if they advance. So 2, they don't advance, but we're still able to conduct combat. They're adjacent here. Technically, these are adjacent here. Even if they're disrupted, they'll attack. It's just they won't attack as strong. Like, for example, here, it's still 4 Russian units to 1 German unit, but 2 of them are disrupted. So essentially they get to add 1 to the roll. So if I'm going to fight here first. So if I roll a 1 or a 2, it's a German victory. It's a German victory. And so I'm going to check for over here, because we'll say that was another fight here. But it's going to be the same situation. They get to add 1 to the roll. Or subtract, yeah, even if they add 1. Well, actually, those 2 are out, and he's not touching that one, so I guess that would be good. They'd add 2 to their roll. I'm going to say then that would be a fail. So that's a German loss, because these 2 units are in good order, and they're not touching him. So he's basically fighting those, and they're lending support. So that's kind of a bummer. So we'll say it's a loss. So he'll retreat. And then we're going to check for disruption while I have it here real quick. And he's not disrupted. We're going to check to see if they are more disrupted because they were adjacent. Oh, yeah. See, because they failed the disruption check, they go back to being fully disrupted. And they get back to fully disrupted. And here, we'll check to see if that's disrupted because he did a fight there. Nope, he is not disrupted. But is he disrupted? Nope, he's good. But he lost. Now see, this is where this could be good for me. Since he lost, he has to retreat. And he's going to retreat this way. So normally, he would be retreating back this hex. But I got a unit here. So he's going to retreat here. But that's created a gap. So that means the next time that this army has to move, he's going to stay put while these units advance, and then he can advance. Because remember, they're trying to maintain and make it so there's no gap. This is actually good news because this unit now is cut off from supply. We created a gap and cut him off, so we might be able to kill that one. That's great. So that was the first army, right? Okay, now we'll check the second army advancement. They rolled a 2. Second army doesn't advance. Yay! That's lucky for us. Now, what is the 8th army going to do? Well, it's going to roll for Francois of the 1st Corps. And he doesn't move on his own. So I get to decide what to do with him. Part of me thinks what I want to do is maybe charge up here anyway and attack. Because they're both disrupted. He would get the combat bonus. So check this out. Because I've got 1 healthy unit compared to 2 disrupted, he gets to add a combat bonus. So he's going to roll. Yay! Well, actually, you don't add, you subtract, because the Germans are trying to get a lower number. So I rolled a natural 1 anyway. So it's a German victory, which means these 2 have to retreat. Now, let's look something up here real quick. I'll be right back, because I just got excited. Okay, now, because the German army won, they have to retreat. They can only retreat southeast or southwest, I guess. Let's see. First Army units retreat northeast or southeast. So northeast. So they can't go southwest. They have to retreat east. Corps that cannot retreat in these directions are removed from play. Alright, so this actually might work out really well. I can move this one here, and you can't stack. So if I move a unit back, let's say I move the cav, this unit can't retreat. So he would be removed from play. Like that. They can't retreat. So they were already disrupted. That kind of makes sense. That's good. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so he moved up and he won. He wasn't disrupted. They had to retreat. So yeah, I think that's legitimate. So the 8th Army is done. So we check for supply. Now see, here's where we're talking that zone of control. There are no Russian units here that would prevent being surrounded by a zone of control. So now it says here, for check to see if they're in supply, you roll a 1, 2, or 3. If I roll a 1, 2, or 3, that unit is eliminated because they're out of supply. If I roll 4, 5, or 6, they get an out of supply marker. And then if I go a second turn with them being out of supply, then they're eliminated. 6. Okay, so they're fine. But they get an out of supply. Wow, okay, this might work out. Now we advance the turn marker. So it's the 23rd of August. 1st Army. Oh, I didn't do rally. I did supply, but I totally skipped rally. This is the only disrupted unit. Now, because they already did a force march, I'll take their force march off as well. See, I got excited. I'm skipping phases. Let's see. He rolled a 4, so he doesn't rally. So he gets rotated to let me know he gets a bonus next time. Okay, I advance my turn marker. I'm going to roll for the Russians. Reroll a 5. I subtract 1 because he's disrupted. It's still a 4. So they still move 1 hex. Now remember, there's a gap. So this guy is not going to move. They had to move to try and fill the gap. But according to the rules, they do have a specific way that they're moving. So he's going to move up here. And you move up. So we still have a gap. So that means even if we advance again, we'd have to move to close this gap. So he's just going to stay put until the rest of his troops can get up here. Now, they're going to battle. And you have 2 units. They're not adjacent, so they don't add their strength to it. I believe they have to be adjacent. Let me double check that. Yeah, looking back, I think I did make one combat mistake earlier, but I don't think it broke the game. But it does say that if you're adjacent with the Russians to any German units here. So I think when I fought earlier, I wouldn't have made like one separate combat roll here and one separate combat roll here. Oh no, that was Germans attacking, so we did that fine. Maybe not. I don't want to go back and fix it. So basically it says if there's combat for the Russians, it just says the entire Russian army fights. It doesn't say that they have to be adjacent. So fighting here would be 3 units. This one's disrupted. This one is kind of tied, but he would be in excess. So the Russians get +1 bonus for having this unit running around causing havoc. So a 6. That is a Russian victory. So I'm going to go ahead and retreat him now, right here. Okay, we're going to check for disruption results. Yeah, he's not disrupted. We're going to see if he disrupts himself further. He makes it, so he's not further disrupted. And you are not disrupted. So we just pushed a corps back. Okay, so that was the Russian 1st Army. Then we make the die roll for the Russian 2nd Army. A 2. They're not moving again. I've been very lucky with that. Usually the Russians are just running straight north, but I've actually been allowed to sit back here and fight. So that's good news. So that's the 2nd Army. 8th Army, we check for Francois. On a 6, he does something. We're going to roll to see which direction he moves. He rolls a 6. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can't move that way, so he won't move. But because he was activated, I don't get to use him for something else. He was still activated. He just realized he can't move that way. So he's done. I could still move this one or these two. Right now, this unit is cut off. I don't have to move. Part of me doesn't want to move, except maybe to move up here and cause some more combat. So that's what we'll do. We're going to move here, and we're going to move here. That's going to create two combats. Let's resolve this one here. So there's no bonus either way. It's just a straight dice 6 roll. And that is a Russian or a German victory. So let's check for disruption. He is not disrupted. Check for disruption. He is not disrupted. And he retreats 1. Oh, game over. Wow. I hope this is right. That looks right. Okay. Now, this one here. Okay, so he's just out of supply. The no supply doesn't affect the combat. I think it does. No supply, I don't think they get the bonus. Let me check that real quick. Yeah, it says that for terms of combat, it's all units that are undisrupted and supplied. So he's not supplied. So essentially, I'm going to get a bonus of 1 on the attack because he's fully strengthed. So we roll that. Well, it's a German loss anyway, even with a bonus. So let's check for disruption. The Russian is disrupted. So we'll go ahead and flip him. And then we'll check for the German. He's not disrupted. But he lost the fight, right? So he still has to retreat. So he's going to fall back here. Okay, now we're going to check for rally. So that's disrupted. Now he will succeed on a 3, 4, 5, or 6. So he is back to normal. And I just disrupted this one. He fails, so he gets rotated. Okay, now we check for supply. And this unit, once again, is surrounded by German zone of control. So he is also, oops, now eliminated. Well, look at that. This time I am wiping out some core. Yeah, you know, maybe just because I cheated once or twice prior to this, my opponent doesn't seem to notice. Okay, so that's the Germans. Then we advance the turn marker. We roll to see if the German First Army will move. And they roll 4, so they move 1. And that keeps the gap. So now we see who's adjacent. Now this is bad for them because I've got 3 adjacent German armies and 2 Russians. So that is now a superiority odds in favor of the Germans. So basically what I do is good units kind of cancel each other out. So that's canceled, and he's the determining bonus factor. And he's a good order. So he's going to subtract 1 from the roll to see if this is a German victory. And it is. So even just on a straight 1, 2, or 3, it's a German victory. So that means the Russians are both going to retreat. So let's just retreat them real quick. Then we're going to check for disruption on all the units involved in combat. So this one here. Nope. Yes, they are disrupted. They are not. They are. And he was adjacent. And he is not disrupted. Now I'm at a point where we've got pretty good odds up here. So when it does become the Germans' turn, they are going to take rail and come down here. Yeah, it was something about you can't take rail or something past this line. I don't remember. I don't want to look it up. So we're just gonna pop on a train at some point and come down here and fight stuff. So that was the Russian first. They moved, lost, got pushed back. Russian Second Army, are they going to advance? They do. They do a forced march. So I'm going to put their Second Army forced march on the next turn tracker, so I know they can't do forced march twice in a row. And then we'll look at the map. They're going to move up 2. They just move this line here. 1, 2. And no fighting. Yeah, see, I've got to be very careful now because, see, look how close they're getting to Königsberg. Not good. Okay, German 8th Army. Does Francois activate? Francois does not activate. So what I'm going to do as far as movement, like I mentioned, we're going to move this corps here, the 17th. He's going to pop on some trains. So what I'm going to do is just kind of look at the path of trains. And I'm pretty liberal with the way trains connect, and since they can move unlimited, it's just a matter of finding a path. Now I found a really wide out of the way path that went up through Königsberg and then down here, so he can eventually get here by rail, because I had to go all the way like through Königsberg, and they switch on the track. Yeah, very convoluted, but it's unlimited movement, so there they are. This now, we're here, and we're now adjacent. Okay, so his movement's done. Are these going to move? No, I'm not going to have these move, except he can't move closer. We're going to move here. And again, the reason why is because I want these guys to come out so I can try to surround them and get them out of supply. Okay, so we're going to say German movement's done. Let's check for combat. Yeah, we're here. I probably should have moved him back, but he's here. So this will be a fight. He gets a bonus of 1 because that's disrupted. He's not. And he wins. Even though he rolled a straight 1. Even if I didn't have modifiers for combat, it's still a 1. So he retreats. And he's going to retreat here. Because again, they're moving along the top of this map chain. And we're going to check. Now see, he just became disrupted. He hasn't had a rally yet, so he cannot become more disrupted. We're going to roll here for him. On a 1, 2, or 3, he's not disrupted. Or he is disrupted. Sorry, 1, 2, or 3, they are disrupted. So he's disrupted. Sorry. And nobody else was in combat. Now down here, they're in combat. So he's going to fight here. So it's just a straight 1, 2, or 3 German victory. German victory. Let's see, just check for disruption. So 1, 2, or 3 disrupted. He is not. 1, 2, or 3 disrupted. He is. Well, that's good, because that could modify. Yeah, I think up here I rolled, but I think I rolled enough that even with the -1 modifier to the first Russian army activation, they were still going to advance 1. But this will make a difference possibly for later. For combat, oh, we just did combat. Because it was a German victory, right, the Russian gets pushed back 1. Now, this is why this is important down here, is because if I can force units back with even just this one guy, that prevents this whole line from moving forward, because it could create a gap. So even if I can come down and just push one flank, that would keep the whole German or Russian Second Army from moving north. So it's okay that I moved him here. Alright, that's it for the Germans. So now you check for supply. This unit up here is technically now out of supply, because he's, you know, Out of supply here, out of supply here, out of supply here. He doesn't have his buddy here. So on a 1, 2, or 3, he's removed from the game. What? Shut up. Okay. So that's another Russian army forced off the map. And down here, there's no supply checks needed. They're good. So what I could do is actually now bring the bulk of these armies out, because he's only one. It's still close to Königsberg, so you gotta be careful, but I think we're doing okay. So that's supply. Rally. He's disrupted, so let's see. Does he make his roll? Oh, I got several Germans disrupted. No. But he rotates, so he'll have easier time next time. Okay. I have a disrupted here. I got 2 disrupted Germans. We'll roll that one first, this one second. This one. So the first one on a 3, 4, 5. Okay, he is. On the second one is not. So we flip him because he's now good order. And this one gets rotated, so next turn he will automatically rally. And then we come down here, Russian second army. Oops, on a 5 or a 6. He does not, but he rotates, so he'll get a 3, 4, 5, or 6 next turn. We check for victory. I have destroyed 3 Russian corps. 1 more corps, and we win. That's why I think up here in the north, when I have a chance, I'm going to back him up, because again, I want to get these guys coming forward just enough that I can flank and surround. Down here, then it's going to be the delaying actions. So let's roll the dice for the Russian first army. We have 1 disrupted unit, so we're going to subtract 1 from the die roll to see if they move. We rolled a 6. It's not a forced march because 1 unit's disrupted, so they just move 1. And they always move. Even if they're disrupted, they move. And they still fight, and the German will take a bonus because he has a healthy unit and they have 1 disrupted. So I will win essentially on a 1, 2, 3, or 4. Alright, that's a German victory. So what we'll do is check to see if he's disrupted or more disrupted again. Alright, nope, he stays where he's at. But he has to retreat. He's going to retreat away. And this is why I want to move this German army. It's because I could probably come up here. Actually, I will push up, because if I'm up here and can force a retreat, that would force him off the map. And that would be a victory. Alright, so we'll try that when the time has come. But that's the Russian first army. Russian second army, they're going to see if they advance. They have 1 disrupted, so we subtract 1 from their march roll. 3 minus 1 is a 2, and so they fail to advance. That disrupted unit keeps them from moving forward. And they have no adjacent units, so there's no combat. It is now the German 8th Army time, so we're going to roll for Francois to see if he activates. Nope. And now we're going to push up. Since I can't move into his deployment zone, I'm going to push up and attack. And this could win the game. So we're going to roll a 1, 2, or 3. I subtract 1 because it was 1 good order unit versus a disrupted. So that is a German victory. Check for disruption. He is not disrupted. Does he become more disrupted? Nope, he does not become more disrupted. However, he has to retreat, and he is removed as well. And then I did not advance down here, which I should have. I should have advanced, but I moved past that part and went straight to fighting. So the German turn would be over. So we check for supply. There's no units stuck in an out of supply kind of mode. Then we check for rally. I have a disrupted German unit here. Now because they rotated once, it's an automatic rally because they're on home ground. Then I have a disrupted Russian second army. They now rally on a 3, 4, 5, or 6. And they are rallied. Then we check for victory. I now have 4 German unit casualties and no Russian, 4 Russian casualties, no Germans. How do you destroy Germans? It's going to be very similar in that if they retreat, and they have to retreat in such a way that they can't retreat because there's no stacking, which means it's really, really hard to destroy Germans. That's why a lot of times you are, forced to push the advance. I think I did mess up one combat where, if I remember, I had like a couple German units here, and I had a German unit here, and I think the Russians had moved and attacked, and I counted it as like 2 separate combats, but it's actually just one combat, and you apply the results to all the adjacent units, and I think that's how it was. Part of me thinks it was a German advancement, so it created the 2 combats, but that's the problem I have when I play a game and try to explain stuff. I sometimes lose track of what I'm doing. But overall, though, I think that's a pretty fair gist of the game. Like I said, I'd had to go back and, for myself, just refresh on where the Germans can move exactly, like how far past this blue deployment line they can go, because I didn't want to reread all of the rules now. I kind of want to just get out and play how I would normally play the game, and it actually worked out to my advantage. So I would think now, to make a challenge for myself, I want to freshen up on that rule about how far I can move, because that really does affect your ability to set up those cutting off, the cut off their supply. But basically, that's the game in a nutshell. You check for First Army advancement. Any units adjacent trigger combat. Then you do the Second Army when you hit August 19th moving forward. Then you do the German 8th Army. Just roll to see if Francois activates and does his own thing. Then check adjacent units for combat. The biggest difference there is that the Russians have a specific movement they have to follow because of the AI that's built in, but the Germans have that flexibility to where they can decide where to move exactly and put how many corps into battle. Then you check for supply to see if if your zone of controls have cut or completely surrounded a unit. So that's why combat by the Germans is important, because if they can push units back and create a gap, then you have a chance of cutting somebody off from supply, which we did, which makes sense, right? Then you rally, and then you check for the victory condition. So yeah, it's that easy. Now, that's the first time I've won like that. That's the first time I've won. I'll put it that way. Normally, I just delay enough so I hit turn 31 and they haven't reached Königsberg. But that's not how you win. You win by eliminating units. And that's the first game I've played where I've actually eliminated units. So if everything went well, and someone watches this and they say, yeah, those were legitimate moves, or you caught your mistakes and explained it, hopefully I didn't cheat my way to a victory. But that's the game. So if you have played this or have comments or did catch some rules violations by me, go ahead and share that down in the comments, because I don't want my victory to be tainted. All right, thanks a lot. Bye.